Hey, it's Booray from Tampa, Florida, and today we're going to talk about the Fuji X-H2 and the Fuji X-H2S. I'm going to break down the differences between these two cameras, and we're going to figure out which one is right for you. Before we get started, don't forget to check out my podcast. It's called Photobomb. It's available anywhere that podcasts are found. I also have a great group on Facebook. It's called Pro Photo Talk with Booray Perry. And I have an Instagram account, and I post a lot of funny stuff there. So be sure and follow me on Instagram at Booray Perry. All right, we got to talk about these two cameras. They've been out now for about 4 or 5 months, and I actually own one of them. If you follow my channel, you know which one I own. I was shooting the X-T4 for a while, and then I upgraded to one of the X-H models. I'm not going to tell you which one yet, just in case you're new to the channel. You can figure it out at the end of the video. But I had to do these comparisons myself. I had to look at these two cameras. I had to pick them apart and figure out which one was going to be the right camera for me. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to give you all the specs. I'm going to break down the differences between the two cameras. But hopefully, I'm also going to be able to give you some insight as to whether or not you really need this thing or whether or not you really need that thing. And by the end of the video, hopefully, you'll know clearly which is the right camera for you. All right, let's get started. So before we talk about the differences between these two cameras, let's talk about what's not different between these two cameras. And there is a lot that is not different between these two cameras. They literally have the same body. They have the same ports. They have the same processor for the images. They have everything really basically the same, except for a few minor things. So if you're thinking, oh wait, what about this, Booray? Is this the same? Yes, it is. It is. It's the same. Everything is the same. They have the same LCD screen on the back. They have the same resolution in the screen. Everything on these cameras is identical except for the sensor. The sensor is the big change, and that sensor size is what really leads to all the differences between these two cameras, because the Fuji X-H2S has a stacked sensor. This is a 26.1 megapixel sensor. This gives you a faster readout speed than you get on the Fuji X-H2, which has the brand new 40.2 megapixel sensor, the highest resolution sensor ever put into an APS-C camera. So, you got that in your head, right? Smaller sensor over in the X-H2S, still plenty big though. Bigger sensor, more megapixels in the X-H2. But the X-H2S can read out to the processor faster because fewer megapixels. And that makes a big difference. So the first difference you're going to notice between these two cameras, because of the sensor size, is the speed at which they can take photographs. So both of them can shoot at 15 frames per second. 15 frames per second is pretty good. High speed. 15 frames per second. You can go to 20 frames per second on both of these cameras, but on the X-H2, if you go to 20 frames per second, you're going to crop down on the image. The camera does this automatically. So instead of shooting 20 frames per second and having a 40 megapixel file, you're going to get a 24 megapixel file. And the 26 megapixel file is over on the X-H2S. So basically they're about the same or in the same ballpark once you go to the 20 frames per second. If you want to go faster than 20 frames per second, the X-H2 is completely out of the race. It cannot go faster mechanically than 20 frames per second. The X-H2S, however, they're just getting started. 30 frames per second, no problem. 40 frames per second, sure. It can shoot 40 frames per second. Now, the difference is both of the cameras, when they're shooting at 15 frames per second, they read out about 1,000 JPEGs or 1,000 RAWs. That's how many will fit into the buffer before the camera will start to lock up on you. Once you get to 20 frames per second, it's the same. Once you get to 30 and to 40, it starts to drop in the Fuji X-H2S. Of course, you can't even do it in the Fuji X-H2. So, it drops, but at least you can do it in the X-H2S if you need that kind of speed. So I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it. It's 1,000 JPEGs and 270 RAWs will fit in the buffer when you're shooting at 30 frames per second. And when you shoot at 40, it's 184 JPEGs and 175 RAWs. Now, 184 JPEGs or 175 RAW seems like a lot, but if you're shooting at 40 frames per second, 4, 8, 12, 16, that's 5 seconds. So if you're shooting at 40 frames per second, 5 seconds is the maximum. 5 seconds and it's going to lock up. So Yeah, I mean, I don't. I guess there are people taking pictures of hummingbirds, and they would need 40 frames per second. But I would never need 40 frames per second. But you know, God bless you. Have fun with 40 frames a second. It's so cool that you're going to get that out of the Fuji X-H2S. Ah, you thought that the whole speed thing was just going to go to the X-H2S, right? Well, mechanically, yeah. But when you talk about the electronic shutter, it's a different story. And it's funny that it works this way, but the X-H2S has a faster mechanical shutter, but it actually has a slower electronic shutter. So if you're a person who shoots with electronic shutter, the X-H2S will go to 32,000, 1/32,000th of a second with the electronic shutter. The X-H2, no S, just the X-H2, it will go wait for it, 180,000. Yeah, I said that right. 1/180,000th of a second with the electronic shutter. And they say, because of new processing and software they've got installed, that you get very little rolling shutter. Yeah, so, you know, put that in your pipe and smoke it. If you need to be shooting at 180,000ths of a second, the Fuji X-H2 will do it. The Fuji X-H2S will not. It'll only go as fast as 1/32,000th of a second. 1/32,000th of a second. Which brings us to video. If you are a video shooter, this is very important to you. These cameras shoot the same types of video, the same codecs of video, and so forth. All of these things are the same. But here's where the big difference is. Both of these cameras will shoot 4K, right? Up to 4K. First of all, both of them will shoot high def, no problem. They all shoot high def. Full high def at 240p. 240 frames per second. 240p high def. Got it? Okay. Now, let's go up from high def and see what we get. Next level, 4K. Great. Got it written down again. Once again, the X-H2 will shoot 4K at 60p. The X-H2S will shoot it at 120p. Twice as fast. That's because you've got that stacked sensor and it's reading out faster. Let's go even higher. 6.2K. At 6.2K, both of them shoot at 30p. Great. Let's go even higher. 8K. Guess what? The X-H2S won't shoot 8K, but the X-H2 will. And this is an odd thing about the video, is that when you're at a lower resolution, you know, when you're at 4K, for example, you get a faster readout speed on the X-H2S. You can get 120 versus 60. But then if you go up from there, suddenly you can't get anything from the X-H2S because you can get 8K from the X-H2. It's only at 30p, but you can get 8K from the X-H2. So it's kind of a trade-off between these two cameras. Like, do you really need 8K? Because if you do, you got to have the X-H2. But if you're like, no, what I really need is really good high def, well, you're going to get better high def and a higher frame rate if you stick with the X-H2S. All right, it's time to talk about what, for many people, is the most important thing you have to look at when you're looking at a camera, and that's money. And there is a substantial difference between these two cameras. The X-H2 lists for about $19.99, about $2,000 for the X-H2, and the X-H2S is $2,500. It runs $24.99. That's what it lists for. So it's $2,000 versus $2,500. So you're going to spend $500 more if you want to get the X-H2S. Now, there is another area you're going to spend some money with the X-H2 that you wouldn't have to spend it with the X-H2S, and that's with your memory cards. Because if you already have a bunch of standard SD cards that you just want to use with your new camera, guess what? You can't do that with the X-H2 because it has to have the Type B CF Express cards. It only has one. There's 2 slots in the camera. Both of them have 2 slots. But one of those slots is the CF Express Type B card, so you will have to buy some new CF Express Type B cards. And that's going to add, well, depending on what you need, it could add $200-300 to your costs. If you need big cards, like if you need a couple of 128 gig cards, something like that, yeah, you could be spending $200 or $300 on those cards, which can come close to evening out these two cameras when it comes to price. Now, if you don't own any cards, you know, if this is a first camera for you, I can't imagine it would be a first camera for you. But if you're planning on buying all new cards, for example, well, then it's not going to be a big difference. I don't think there's going to be a huge swing in the price. But if you already have your cards, now you're going to have to buy some new cards if you get the X-H2S. the X-H2. Whew, I've been saying that a lot. There is one other feature that the Fuji X-H2 has that the X-H2S does not have, and it's called Pixel Shift Multi-Shot. When you use this feature, the camera will take 20 different images, and it will shift each image a half a pixel. Yeah, just one little half a pixel. It takes 20 different images, and then it combines them using special software you get from Fuji to make one image that is 160 megapixels. Right? Try viewing that. 160 megapixel image. So really, really unbelievable detail, unbelievable resolution. There's some limitations to it. For example, you can't shoot over 1600 ISO if you're using this feature. But it's pretty cool. You know, I can definitely see where there are people who would want to use this in certain situations to get some really incredible, realistic images. All right, I think we've done a good job of breaking down the difference between each one of these cameras. Let's try and wrap it all up, put the two things together side by side, and figure out which one is the best one for you. All right, whew. This is a lot of stuff, right? I mean, these cameras aren't that different, but still, it's a lot of little detail-y stuff that you have to look at between these cameras. It makes it really hard to pick them because, to be honest, they're both great cameras. They're both flagship cameras for the Fuji line. It's the top of the line. It's the best cameras you can get from Fuji. One of them is more expensive, but it doesn't mean that it's better. They're really just different. So let's write it all up and let's put it on two sides of the screen and take a look at these things. And what I want you to do is, as I'm talking about each one, think to yourself, is this important to me? Because just having this thing is better than that thing, that's not the real reason you pick a camera. You pick a camera because this thing is important to me, and I want that, right? So think about what's important to you. You make a little list. Keep a little checklist. Okay, X-H2. It has Pixel Shift Multi-Shot. X-H2S does not have that. All right, sure. Is that important to you? Okay. X-H2. It has a 40.2 megapixel sensor, right? X-H2S does not have that. So now we're talking about more resolution and bigger files. If you're a person who likes to crop a lot, this might be something that's really interesting to you. So keep in mind that only comes with the X-H2. X-H2, ISO of 125. That's your maximum floor versus 160 on the X-H2S. Is that important to you? That's a third of a stop. If you shoot in really, really bright areas, sometimes that third of a stop can be important. If you're trying to light someone in a bright area, you need to get the camera, you need to get that ISO as low as you can to control your background. That extra third of a stop can come in handy. X-H2, 8K video. You want to shoot 8K video? Well, you're going to have the X-H2 because the X-H2S simply can't do it. And finally, the E-shutter. If you want to have an E-shutter that goes 1/180,000th of a second, you can only get that on the X-H2. However, let's go over to the other side and take a look at the Fuji X-2S. X-H2S, I should say. Mechanical shutter. Do you want to shoot a mechanical shutter at 40 frames per second? You can only do that with the Fuji X-H2S. Video. Do you want double the frames per second at 4K? That's important. Double the frames per second. If you're a video shooter, being able to shoot 4K at 120p instead of 60p may be everything you need to know about this camera. Those are the main differences between the two cameras, and you have to figure out which one is right for you. Now, I know which one I decided was right for me. I'm a still shooter. I don't really shoot video, and I mean I don't shoot video at all. So for me, having 40 megapixels was huge. That was really the whole thing for me. I wanted 40 megapixels. I wanted more resolution so I could crop my images more if I wanted to and still have a usable image. That's all I need to know. It doesn't matter to me that the 4K resolution is better on the X-H2S. It doesn't matter to me that the X-H2 can shoot 8K. Video just doesn't really matter to me at all. I'll tell you what did matter to me is that the X-H2S costs $500 more. Yeah, no. I wanted more resolution and $500 less. So I went with the Fuji X-H2. That being said, a lot of people love the X-H2S. So you have to remember the H stands for hybrid. These cameras are supposed to be for photo and video. And if video is a big part of why you want this camera, the X-H2S is probably going to be your choice. All right, I hope that I've helped you figure something out here. I hope you've got a better direction on where you want to go. Please throw me a like, throw me a subscribe, click the little bell thing so you get notifications on my channel. And don't forget that all of my gear, everything that I carry, is all listed on my website. Just go down in the description and take a look. There's a link there and all my gear is there. You might find some great stuff there that you like for your kit as well. And if you do and you buy something, I get a couple of dollars and it helps me to keep this channel alive. All right, thanks for watching.